Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser-known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway. Welcome back to Paris History Avec Hemingway. I'm with Claudine Hemingway for our normal Monday hangouts, and today we are talking about Heloise. And maybe you've heard of her, maybe you have not, but either way, Claudine is going to teach us so much today.
Yeah, she is. This was one that when we did one of our live walks in Paris, we went by a location where she used to live, and somebody was like, "Have you done a podcast about her yet?" It's like, nope, she's on the list. But most people will know her as usually they hear Heloise and Abelard. And they were kind of the very first Romeo and Juliette, long before Shakespeare wrote about it. But Heloise herself, she was born December 1st, 1092, maybe. They're a little unsure of her birth year. So you usually see it anywhere between 1070 and 1092. When we go back that far, sometimes the records aren't really the best. But she was born in 1092-ish, and her mother founded an abbey. And in 1101, it was the Notre Dame de Fontevraud. And at that point, her mom kind of threw herself into this whole thing. So Heloise was basically raised by her brother until she entered an abbey to be taught by the Benedict nuns.
Oh, wow. So she was grew up with religion, basically.
Oh, for sure.
And these two were who inspired Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet?
Well, I don't know if they inspired, but they were basically Romeo and Juliet before there was a Romeo and Juliet.
Love story. All French people know about them. I don't know that very many Americans know about them.
Yeah, I don't think so. There was something recently somebody told that they were brought up into. Somebody said they were watching some movie and they were brought up. So then they were kind of wondering who they were. But it's not usually something that a lot of Americans usually know about.
Yeah, I had never heard of him.
Her father was pretty much unknown. They thought he might have been a nobleman, but they're not sure who her father was. So, but we're also looking at records from the 11th century. So, they didn't. It's a little harder.
Yeah, a lot of fires between now and then.
There was a lot of destruction. And at 11 years old, she was sent to Paris to live with her mother's brother, Fulbert. He was a canon at the Hotel Dieu de Paris, which is there, right there at the on Ile de la Cité. Hotel Dieu is right next to Notre Dame. At this point, Notre Dame wasn't even there yet. But wow. Heloise was educated. She was one of the most educated women at that time through her life. She was educated at the Saint Christophe, the church that stood right in front of where the Notre Dame is today. Just one of those many churches that was on the island. And but Uncle Fulbert had lofty goals. He wanted to move up in the church to become a canon at the Église Saint-Étienne, which stood right where Notre Dame is today. It was in the same place. But he decided at that time that he would bring in some boarders into his house. So he had, this big, pretty good sized house, and it was just there on the Quai de Fleurs, very close, just overlooking Ile Saint-Louis. And so he had this house, and he thought, I'm going to bring in some boarders. And so he decided to bring in this man to live at their house, Abelard. And Abelard at the time was just kind of like the bee's knees of like all of the men in Paris at the time. He was very charismatic, and he was a professor and a teacher, and he worked within the church, and everybody, just like all of the women, thought he was just he was just the Brad Pitt of the time.
I love it.
So he moved in, and he saw Heloise, who was also very beautiful. She's depicted in art. Most of the time she's wearing kind of, her dress will be kind of a tight around her bodice, and then, have this long skirt. But she always is also depicted as being this very beautiful. So they were quite the perfect little pair. But they were instantly dazzled by each other. And so to kind of to keep it from Uncle Fulbert, he decided to take her on as kind of a solo little student, and educate her and teach her. And she was very smart. She was learning. She basically knew Greek and Latin and Hebrew, and she basically, like, anything she read, she just completely absorbed.
And she was 11 when they met.
Yeah. So they ended up, they would have these like little, moments together under the disguise of being, being educated. But the two of them had quite the relationship, which we'll hear about a little bit later in some of their letters. It was really pretty steamy.
Education.
It's all education. But he was kind of at that time, I don't think it was the who was it, Mary Kay Letourneau, that had the thing with her student. It wasn't really like that, because she was a little bit older at the time, and he was a member of the church and everything else. But everybody in Paris at the time, thought she was just this beautiful woman. So then the fact that now the two of them are together, it just caused people to get very jealous and upset. Good thing they didn't have, TMZ and everything at that time.
And also, like, she was 11. So by old timey standards, I mean, she was like a 40-year-old woman,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think she was a little bit older when he came into play, but she was still a teenager.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they also, because they don't know how old, she could have been 15. She could have been 27, because they can't pinpoint the exact year of her birth. So it could have been kind of creepy. It could have been just fine.
Yeah. We'll never know. We'll never know. But along with being so intelligent, she was also so beautiful. And so, they definitely were making a lot of waves within the city for everybody that would come across them. But in 1112, she was the first woman to graduate from cathedral school. The first woman
at that time. So Heloise and Abelard would find themselves with child shortly after.
Whoops.
And she got pregnant. And so, of course, I think they were probably a little bit worried about what Uncle Fulbert was going to do. And so at that time, Abelard insisted that she go off to Brittany and stay with his family, stay with his sister. So she went out there, and for the entire time of her pregnancy, she ended up giving birth there. Abelard was there when she gave birth. She, in the fall of 1116, she gave birth, and they named their son Astrolab.
That is a fun name.
I know, it means first son of God, but it's just such a funny name. I mean, that sounds like something somebody would name their kid now.
Gwyneth Paltrow.
Exactly. Yeah. Astrolab. But so they left the baby there with his sister Dionysis, and they just went back to Paris. So
see you, kid.
Yeah. And he stayed there his entire life. He never was with the two of them. So
what? They abandoned Astrolab?
Yeah. Astrolab was abandoned.
Poor Astrolab.
But after the birth, they returned to Paris. And so they thought, at this point, of course, Uncle Fulbert was fully aware of what happened. And so they thought they'd go back and, try to smooth things over. And so Abelard had the idea that they get married, thinking that would make Uncle happy. Well, it did not make him happy. And Heloise did not want to get married. She looked at the act of marriage as close to slavery. She also
Modern
didn't
woman.
want. Yeah, she was. Yeah, for especially like in the 1100s.
Yeah, she even knew back then. Wow.
I know. And so he was trying to convince her, but she was also, because they needed to kind of keep their relationship kind of hidden because of his desires to move up into the church. It was kind of frowned upon, and just the whole basis of their relationship. And so, she just had these like very strong ideals about it. Well, he ended up convincing her, and they ended up getting married early in the morning. And but so not many people would see him. And they did it at the Chapel of St. Christophe. And they had, there was a few people there. And then they ended up having the second ceremony at the Chapel of St. Agnan, which is that little chapel that was just down the street from where she used to live. That's on Ile de la Cité that we walked past when we did a live walk in Paris, which is kind of cool that it's one of the few ones still there. There's remnants of it inside. And so, but Uncle Fulbert, for a hot second, he was okay with this idea. And then he decided he wasn't okay with this idea. And so, Heloise, they couldn't live together. Heloise and Abelard could not live together. So she was living with her uncle, back to living, because, then it would be pretty much common knowledge if she, of course, was living with him. And their marriage was kept pretty quiet. But then Uncle Fulbert got a little bit upset about the whole idea and convinced a bunch of goons, we could call them, to go over to Abelard's house in the middle of the night. They broke into his house and castrated him.
Oh, God. Oh.
They cut off his balls.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, I can't even imagine.
Horrible. Just horrible. And so the next morning, everybody, it was already had spread that this had happened. And there was all these people waiting outside of his house. And it was just everybody in Paris knew that this had happened. So the police got involved. They didn't do anything to the guys that actually committed the act, but Uncle Fulbert was arrested, and they would eventually take his home and sell it. Wow. And the money would go, most of the money went to Abelard in the name of his wife.
And his balls.
And his balls.
Well, that worked out well for them, kind of.
I know. It's so horrible, though. I mean, Uncle Fulbert, he had some, I get being maybe the overbearing uncle, but, at some point, maybe you should just let it go. They're together.
Yeah, he lost his whole career and his house.
Yeah, he lost it. He basically lost everything because of it.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Cool it, uncle.
Cool it. But so Abelard convinced Heloise that she should leave Paris. And so she left Paris and she went to go to a nunnery, a convent. And she stayed there for a long time. He would come over and come visit her and climb the wall to get in. And they would have some very steamy visits there in the old convent.
Things were still working.
Things were still working, even though he was castrated. I think maybe Uncle Fulbert cut the wrong thing off.
Yeah, what happened there?
Yeah, but back in Paris, he was he would stay. He would go back to Paris, and but this thing was always just flying around. Everybody was talking about it, and so she was kind of out of sight and at this convent. He would end up also leaving. And he would go, and he had always dreamed of building his own monastery. And so he left Paris, and he was working on doing that. And at this time, what makes Heloise and Abelard so famous, even to this day, is because of their letters. And they would exchange letters, and these letters, some of them were very, very hot and sexy.
The letters still exist like that long ago?
Yeah, well, at first there was only like 4 or 5 of them. And then over time, they've discovered a bunch more, and they've all been printed. I actually got a book in Paris that is their letters.
I can't believe they survived.
Yeah, I know. And I haven't actually I don't even think I've even looked at the book. I haven't even read some of the letters, but I mean, I read quite a few excerpts online, and it was just like that she would write of having lewd visions of pleasure. And that they shared endless passion for each other.
Endless passion.
And she would think of those moments that they were together, and then it would be kind of graphic. There's also hints in the letters that maybe there was a little S&M going on between the two of them.
What? I mean, he was basically a priest and she was a nun.
Yeah.
And there was some S&M action.
I know. I mean, get it, guys. I mean, wow. But it was also medieval times, so wasn't it all like that?
I was going to say, quite literally, like, that was just the Sunday.
Yeah. So, but they would share these letters with each other. And it was these letters later that is how we know their whole story and how they became kind of, the subject of fascination. But they were separated at this point. At one point, they, weren't able to see each other anymore once he went to, to build this monastery and this church that he wanted to build. But he died on April 21st, 1142. So actually just a few days from today.
Yeah,
that this is playing. But at the Abbey of Saint Marcel, and Heloise was completely heartbroken when she got the news. She had reached out to the Count of Champagne, Thibault, and asked him to help get Abelard buried in the abbey. And so she was doing everything she could to follow like some of his wishes that he wanted. In 1144, his body was stolen.
Who steals a body?
I know, just creepy. And then it was recovered, and it was later buried in front of the altar of the abbey that he loved so dearly.
Wait, they recovered the body?
Yeah, they got the body back.
I want to know that story. Like, first how, like, what, and then how, what?
I know. Yeah. But then there is also still to this day, especially when we go back this far, of like, is this actually their bones, or
yeah,
there's or do they just find some femurs and throw it in a box and here you go?
That's how I imagine it. They get like a finger bone and they're like, this is probably him. We'll just throw that in there.
Yeah, nobody's gonna know. They didn't have CSI back then.
Oh my God. But why'd they steal his body anyway? Eek.
I don't know. But creepy, very creepy. But Heloise would live the rest of her life at the Abbey, and she mourned the loss of her, great love, Abelard. And on May 16th, 1164, she died. She was buried next to him in front of the altar. So she was placed. She was buried right next to him, where they could spend eternity together. But this was the letters started to be published much later after they died, and it became got a lot of attention, and people became fascinated with them. In the 19th century, Josephine of Napoleon and Josephine, she ended up falling completely in love with these letters, and so she was just really fascinated by them. And at this same time, this is when they were building and creating the Père Lachaise cemetery. And they were at Père Lachaise at the time was outside Paris, like far outside Paris. And a lot of people didn't want to, have their loved ones buried because it just was too far for them to go visit. And, it was just ridiculous how far they had to go.
I still feel that way today.
Yeah. So they looked at having, they moved Jean de La Fontaine and Molière out there, thinking, this will bring people, having some celebrities there will bring people in. And then Josephine actually suggested that they put Heloise and Abelard out there as well.
Great idea.
So they were dug up and brought to Paris. And one of my very favorite people, Alexander Lenoir, who was the one that saved the monuments during the French Revolution, he ended up designing the Gothic. It looks like a little, like a little tiny chapel. and the two of them are depicted laying on the bed with their hands folded and like looking up towards the sky. And
I love their little spot. It's kind of hard to find too.
it is kind of, I think I went there 2 or 3 times before I actually found them. And it's just such a cute, like it's just this adorable little gothic little tomb. But he used a lot of the stones from that abbey, from the monastery and abbey that Abelard created.
Oh, that's so interesting. I like that. I didn't know that part.
Yeah, so that's really cool. The last time I was there and I saw it, there was a lot of, there were some scaffolding pieces. I don't know if it was just holding it together or it was getting ready to get restored a little bit. But hopefully it is getting restored and they could save it. But it did help. Like they brought these somewhat famous people there. And then after that, everybody wanted to be buried there.
Yeah, there's like a waiting list now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I would be like, you know what? Well, maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'd be like, I want to be buried next to Neil Diamond.
Not Gertrude Stein.
Not Gertrude Stein. No, not after her Nazi
affiliation. But what happened to Astrolab? Where's Astrolab?
Astrolab, he ended up living his life over there in Brittany. I think he died, when he didn't live a long life, but he stayed there and lived with his aunt. I wonder if he ever knew it was his aunt, or they were probably like, you're our son. And then later he finds out on Maury Povich.
And his parents, gosh, the whole thing is crazy. Also, I'm just so curious how he survived having his parts cut off, because I feel like there'd be a lot of blood and healthcare wasn't that great back then. Like the whole thing just seems insane.
I know. I don't think they cut it off and then cauterized it, so he didn't bleed out.
Oh, that sounds so painful.
They probably came in and like slash and then left.
Well, I guess that's more romantic than the real Romeo and Juliet because they lived a lot longer.
I know they lived a lot longer, and they had these like letters that were laced with, sexy talk and S&M.
Maybe that's what really made them famous was the letters, because otherwise I don't think anybody would really care.
Oh yeah, nobody would even know who they were if it wasn't for the letters. I better take a look at those letters and see what's going on in there.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure. Does your book translate them as well?
Yeah, no, they're all in English.
Oh, that's cool. Well, Let me know how that goes. I feel like that was like they were the first ones to like write pornographic books of their time.
I know. It was like, have you seen those the images from Pompeii? Like some of the images that were painted on the walls at Pompeii are like super, super, like there's a lot of like, it's just like, whoa, okay. I didn't know that was going on then.
Yeah, I remember I did a tour of Pompeii and our tour guide was telling us there was a prostitution house and basically people couldn't read and write. So they just point at the picture for what sexy thing they wanted. So that's why there's all those sexual drawings, because people would literally just point and be like, yep, that's what I want.
Because they're like Kama Sutra kind of images. Like you're like, whoa.
Yeah, Pompeii's really cool, and that was actually the most fascinating part for me. I was like, oh, okay, the sexy house over here. Point to what you want, because even back then, people were paying for that.
That's like the church. That's why they did stained glasses, because people couldn't read. So that's how they were taught, like the Bible and all these stories. But that's a whole new take on it over there at Pompeii.
Yeah, that was the Italian take on it. Wow. Yeah, that's why the graphics are there. People wanted to know what they wanted, what they were paying for,
That's hilarious.
Yeah, one day you'll make it there and see him himself. Very nice. First stop, Playboys written on the walls there.
I know. I was just like, whoa, people check him out. I'm not going to I don't know if I'm going to post those pictures on my website. But later on in the 1980s, a feminist, Michelle Ledoux, she decided to create and call something the Heloise complex. And that was basically when a woman who had an intellectual contribution is erased in favor of her spouse. Because that's what they thought. I think, she definitely was very outspoken and she was very educated and she was against getting married. But I don't at the same time. I mean, from what she sounded like, I doubt that she would be like, I'm just going to sit home and, be making you dinner.
Yeah, but it's also sad that like all that talent and brains was just like put into a convent. Like,
Yeah.
Like, I think she could have, like, if it was a different time, she'd be running like the UN or something.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
She sounded like a genius.
Yeah. But yeah, it's kind of it's a very sad story, but it's also kind of but I was really shocked when I saw that it was like, oh, and there's, they're involved in S&M. You always hear their story and think, oh, it's this beautiful love story. Heloise and Abelard and their undying, love that they had for each other, star-crossed lovers. And it's like, whoa.
Yeah, I don't remember hearing that part because you hear about them all the time, but not that part.
Nope.
Nope. Well, poor Astrolab. I was thinking about Astrolab. But yeah, it was really cool to walk by their actual house on our tour. And every Sunday for our listeners, we always do live virtual tours around Paris, and you guys can jump on those. So just send us a message if you want to join, or check out Claudine's Instagram, Blue Blonde Rouge, and you can join every Sunday. They're super fun.
Yeah, it's really fun. I mean, sadly, the house, of course, has been torn down and something else built there. But you see, they do have a big sign over their door, and I'll put some pictures, and maybe I'll even put a little clip from our live walk so you could see it. But there's a sign above the door, and then it has like two little sculptures, one of Heloise and one of Abelard on either end of the sign. But you could see where it was. And at the time, Ile de la Cité was basically, especially at that end of Ile de la Cité, which is covered with churches. Like there was a ton of churches basically right in front of what we know of Notre Dame today. And there was, convent schools and everything. So it was quite the religious little island at that time.
Yeah, it still is, with Notre Dame in the center of it all being rebuilt right now. Well, thanks so much, Claudine, and we hope you guys enjoyed the show. Tune in next week for another edition of Paris History avec a Hemingway.
Thank you for listening to Paris History avec a Hemingway. If you want to find out some more, you could always find me on my Instagram page, Claudine Bleu Blanc Rouge, and that's BLEU, as in the French way to spell it. And each day I post a daily history lesson about a person or a place or something in Paris, or it's lots of fun facts. And then also at ClaudineHemingway.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter there.